Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile found...
Victor Goddard of the Royal Air Force was lost. Somewhere over Scotland, a heavy storm had caught him, and now he needed to find a landmark. He eased his Hawker Hart biplane down through the clouds, hoping to find clear weather below him, and perhaps to catch a glimpse of the Drim, an abandoned airfield that he thought was somewhere in the vicinity. His instincts were good. Drim was not far ahead of him, and from it he could take new bearings. Then, when he was about a quarter of a mile from the airfield, something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, he wrote later, the area was bathed in an ethereal light as though the sun were shining on a midsummer day. Drim was not deserted, was not abandoned and falling into ruin at all. It was a hive of activity, of mechanics in blue overalls at work on yellow planes, all bright in the sunlight. He flew over them at an altitude of no more than 50 feet, a little surprised that no one looked up as his plane went over, and headed back into the clouds, now confident of his direction. The year was 1934. In 1934, Drim Airfield was an abandoned ruin. In 1938, with the threat of war growing daily, Drim was reopened as an Air Force flying school, and the color of British training planes changed from silver to yellow. Victor Goddard had flown out of the clouds and briefly, 4 years into the future. At Farmington, New Mexico on March 18, 1950, the entire populace of some 5,000 inhabitants, including the mayor, newspapermen, and highway patrolmen, watched hundreds of strange objects performing aerial acrobatics in the sky for more than an hour in the late morning. Some of the objects, described as spaceships, streaked by at speeds calculated at more than 1,000 miles per hour and participated in group formation flying. The UFOs disappeared before noon but were back again in the afternoon. Newspapers reported incredible maneuverability and acute control in split-second timing by their ability to avoid collisions. Late one night in 1681, a miller, James Graham of County Durham, England, was accosted by the hideous ghost of a young woman. She was drenched with blood and had 5 open wounds on her head. She told Graham that her name was Ann Walker and that she had been murdered with a pickaxe by one Mark Sharp, acting on instruction from a relative of hers, also named Walker, by whom she was pregnant. She made clear to Graham that unless he gave this information to the local magistrate, she would continue to haunt him. Refusing to believe what he had experienced, Graham did nothing but after the apparition appeared, pleaded, and threatened twice more, he went to the authorities with the grisly story. A pit identified by the ghost was searched, and Ann Walker's body was found. Sharp and Walker were arrested, tried, found guilty, and hanged. Ann's spirit, thus avenged, did not appear again. Whether it's human or something else, they cut that animal, and it was not a cow or horse or predator that left those tracks, swore the investigating officer, who declared he was confused as hell. The victim was an 11-month-old bull found dead and minus its sexual organs and rectum on April 24, 1978. Its owner happened to be the same rancher from Dulce, New Mexico, who had reported a mutilated cow 2 years earlier. According to the story carried in the Albuquerque Journal, the tracks were similar to those found on the ranch in 1976. Various people in the area claimed they saw strange lights in the sky at the supposed time of the incident, and the officer of the Department of Game and Fish reported a large orange light in the darkness along the ridge directly south of the meadow. At the summit of Big Hill in the Cumberland Mountains in Jackson County, Kentucky, is a layer of Carboniferous sandstone. In the 1880s, it was crossed by a wagon trail that in time broke up the surface of the rock. When the resulting debris was cleared away, a series of tracks was discovered in this Carboniferous layer about 300 million years old. There were imprints of bear, something resembling a large horse, and 2 tracks of a human being, good-sized, toes well spread, and very distinctly marked. The prints were examined by Professor J. F. Brown of Berea College, Kentucky. At the center of one of the large Ohio burial mounds, excavators in 1891 found the skeleton of a massive man wrapped in copper armor. On the head was a copper cap, and copper moldings encased the jaws. The arms were clad in copper, and so were the chest and stomach. On either side of the head were wooden antlers encased in copper, and the mouth cavity was filled with immense but decayed pearls. Around the neck was a necklace of bear's teeth inlaid with pearls. Beside the skeleton of the giant lay that of a woman. The remains were found at a depth of 14 feet in a mound 500 feet long, 200 feet wide, and 28 feet high. What became known as the Devil's Hoof Marks were so called by the astounded villagers who saw them appear overnight in rural England in 1855. On the morning of February 8th, countless numbers of unidentifiable prints were discovered in the snow around 18 communities in the county of Devon. They were shaped like small horseshoes and ran in absolutely straight lines, one directly behind another, as if whatever had made them had only one leg, or a peculiarly mincing gait. In a single night, the unknown beast had traveled about 100 miles, crossing a wide river, and had skulked around houses. In some places, it had apparently walked right up walls and along rooftops, and here and there the tracks gave the impression that the thing had actually passed through walls and roofs. For some time thereafter, people feared to go out after dark, and the superstitious believed that the tracks were made by Satan himself. The Mississippi riverboat Iron Mountain, more than 180 feet long and towing barges loaded with a cargo of cotton and molasses, set out in June 1872 from Vicksburg. Later, the barges came floating downstream. The tow rope had been cut rather than snapped or cast off. No one ever saw the Iron Mountain or her 52 passengers again. No trace of wreckage or floating cargo from the riverboat's deck load was ever found. The last of the pterodactyls, flying reptiles with leathery wings and long toothy beaks, died out about 100 million years ago, according to established scientific opinion. But in the experience of a number of startled French workmen, the last one died in the winter of 1856 in a partially completed railway tunnel between Saint-Dizier and Nancy lines. In the half-light of the tunnel, something monstrous stumbled toward them out of the great boulder of Jurassic limestone they had just split open. It fluttered its wings, croaked, and died at their feet. The creature, whose wingspan was 10 feet 7 inches, had 4 legs joined by a membrane, like a bat. What should have been feet were long talons, and the mouth was arrayed with sharp teeth. The skin was like black leather, thick and oily. At the nearby town of Gray, the creature was immediately identified by a local student of paleontology as pterodactyl. The rock stratum in which it had been found was consistent with the period when pterodactyls lived, and the limestone boulder that had imprisoned the winged reptile for millions of years was found to contain a cavity in the form of an exact mold of the creature's body. In the year 1889, in northeastern Sikkim, Major Lawrence Austin Waddell of the Indian Army Medical Corps found large footprints in the Himalayan snows at 17,000 feet. In his book, Among the Himalayas, published in 1899, he wrote, "These were alleged by my Sherpa porters to be the trail of the hairy wild men who are believed to live amongst the eternal snows, along with the mythical white lions whose roar is reputed to be heard during storms. The belief in these creatures is universal among Tibetans." Thank you for listening to this episode of the Shadowland Radio Show, Mysteries of the Unexplained, Classic Encounters. This is Dr. William Lester. Thank you, and I promise to see each and every one of you again on the flip side.